So what they did is they decided, well, you know what? We're kind of our own army here. We are Poland, because they were acting with, under a government in exile. So they decided to enlist Voytek into the Polish army. And to make it official, they gave him a serial number. They gave him a rank. He was a private, and they gave him a paycheck. And Voytek, because he now was officially a Polish soldier, enlisted in the Polish army, they allowed him, believe it or not, of course, because it's a government in exile, they allowed him to be transported to Italy.
Wow.
To the battlefront of Monte Cassino. Hey, everybody, welcome to our first episode of WTF History. This is episode 1. This is where my fellow presenter, Mike Gatto, and myself, we share stories from history that we think will make you go, what the
Now, you have a World War II story as well, and it also comes from the eastern part of
Mine is perhaps a little nicer. Mine is kind of friendly. Mine is about Wojciech, the bear, that fought for the Polish army. And when I say he fought for the Polish army, I mean that sincerely. He actually was enlisted into the Polish army and had a rank, a social security number, and received a paycheck.
Wow.
So in 1939, the Germans took over Poland. They swept through Poland, and at that point in the war, they still had agreements with the Soviet Union. They had not really, attacked the Soviet Union at that time. So the Soviets agreed to, transport about 325,000 Polish citizens into the Soviet Union in POW camps, and they kept them there. At the same time, there was a Polish, government in exile, and they were still trying to operate as a government, and they were doing what they could do. But in 1941, right when the Germans started attacking the Soviet Union, all of those sorts of agreements fell apart. And the Soviets said, well, hey, we have all these Polish people. Why don't we release them? We start to, transport them out of here. Because, to be honest, because of the things like you've talked about with Stalingrad, they couldn't afford them. They couldn't afford to keep them anymore. So what they allowed them to do is create an army, right? Because you got all these Polish people who have been moved into the Soviet Union, and they've got a lot of pride in their country, and they want to do something. They want to fight the Germans, right? They want to win their country back. And so they allowed them to create what was called the Anders Army, and it was named after their leader. He was a General Anders. And so what this army would do is this army was made up of people who came out of the POW camps, and initially it was about 10,000, but it grew in size to be about 75,000, including civilians and others. And it worked under the Polish government in exile and jointly with the Soviet Union. If we're to look at your story regarding Stalingrad, this is a way for the Soviets to be able to get more people into the war effort and get them off of their dole. Right? They didn't want to. They could not afford to keep them up in these POW camps anymore. They just couldn't. So what they did was they allowed them to organize down in Uzbekistan, and I think a lot of our viewers, are, I don't know if they're viewing this, they probably know, but many of the younger viewers don't realize that a lot of those countries were actually part of the Soviet Union. Uzbekistan, all the stands, those were all part of the. They were all part of the Soviet Union. So it was very, very, very large. So they were down in Uzbekistan. And the Germans were in Iran, but then at one point, the Soviets and the Brits took over Iran. Right? They had the battles in Iran, and that became Allied territory. So the Soviets allowed Anders' army to move down into Iran, and they could keep peace there, patrol it, do what they do, because they were now a functioning artillery division. So on the trip through the mountains to get to Iran, because those of you who aren't familiar, there are huge mountain ranges surrounding Iran to the north, and they encountered a little shepherd boy on April 8th, 1942, and the little shepherd boy had a baby bear, a little bear cub, very, very young little brown bear in a bag. And there was a woman there, an 18-year-old civilian who was traveling with Anders' army, and she fell in love with the bear. It's like, oh my God, we can't let this bear just like live in a bag, you know. She probably said it in Polish though, and she's like, we got to do something, you know. And so they bought the little bear cub from the shepherd in the mountains. So they continued their journey down into Tehran, and they gave him the name Voytek because he was a happy bear. He was gregarious. He didn't have a mean bone in his body, and he learned to live with the Polish soldiers while he was there, stationed in Iran with the division. And he would and people are going to get upset about this, but hey, it was the 1940s. He would smoke cigarettes, and he would have signals which he would give them to say, "I wanted a cigarette." He would drink. He drank alcohol with the Polish soldiers because, of course, he did because they're Polish soldiers.
Well, hold on. I got to interrupt you just there. We were just talking about how, in a very serious tone when I did Stalingrad, we were talking about how people might not be as tough or as used to hardship as they were. I mean, if you're sitting in a trench having a few vodkas with a bear, you're a pretty tough person, I would think, because I would not want to, sit back in a trench and throw a few back with a bear.
Right. Right. Well, I think, Mike, I think they had experience with this bear and his personality where they knew that this might be a safe endeavor. But by the way, the bear did go to a POW camp for a little bit with Irina. I had forgot to put that in there. And she eventually was like, this is no place for a bear. Like an army division was. So she donated it to the transport company, which later became the 22nd Artillery Supply Company. They're in the deserts of Iran. All right, so here's where we get a little interesting. So in 1943, the 22nd Artillery Supply Company received orders to go to the front, and the front at that point for them would have been Italy. There was a huge battle taking place. There were a lot of little skirmishes taking place, but it looked like everything was going to come to a head at a place called Monte Cassino. And Mike, I know you're salivating because I'm talking about Italy. So, and I'm sure you're very familiar with Monte Cassino,
of course,
and the battle that happened there. But you didn't know this. So the Polish soldiers, the 22nd Artillery Supply Division, they had become very attached to the bear. He loved to wrestle. Voytek means happy warrior, so he was just honestly really happy warrior. And they were, having fun with him. And now they had to leave him in Iran. And so the soldiers were upset because they're like, we can't leave this guy. But of course, regulations would not allow you to transport a bear, one, on the military transport, secondly, to a frontline battle position. So what they did is they decided, well, you know what? We're kind of our own army here. We are Poland because they were acting with, under a government in exile. So they decided to enlist Voytek into the Polish army. And to make it official, they gave him a serial number. They gave him a rank. He was a private, and they gave him a paycheck. And Voytek, because he now was officially a Polish soldier, enlisted in the Polish army, they allowed him, believe it or not, of course, because it's a government in exile, they allowed him to be transported to Italy to the battlefront of Monte Cassino. It gets better, Mike. So, as you know, the Battle of Monte Cassino was a horrific scene in Italy. One of the bloodiest. Over 70,000 people died in the battle in that battle on all sides, right? And so it was a lot of hand to hand, like kind of what you described down in Stalingrad, but also a lot of heavy artillery, right? And Monte Cassino is this place that's on top of this big rock mountain, and that's. It's what it was. And so the Allies were holed up there. So they actually took Voytek the bear to the front with them, the artillery division. And he was he had a handler named Heinrich, but at some point, because the battle was so bloody and so many people were dying, his handler had to be called up to the front away from the artillery division to be a spotter, a signalman. And so he had to leave Voytek. Well, during the battle, Voytek, because he was a really smart little bear, he had been watching the behavior of all the soldiers around him. And he had been, just watching them for hours as to what they did. So Heinrich left, and he was really worried because, like, what's going to happen with the bear? He's probably going to get killed. He's probably going to wander off, because everybody's just trying to save their lives at that point and fight a war. Well, because Voytek had spent so much time watching the soldiers' behaviors, what Voytek, this brown bear, did is he went over to where they stored the ammunition, these 500-pound or hundreds of pound crates of ammo, and he started carrying them to the front line
Wow.
where the artillerymen were. And so throughout that battle, with bullets zinging around him, and what does Voytek care? What the you know about bullets, right? He's just like carrying as he had seen the humans do. And everybody was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" So, as you know, the Allies ended up winning there, and went on to, in short order, go back and take over Europe, and take over Italy, take over Europe, or take back. Sorry. But everyone called Voytek a hero after that, and so much so was he a hero that the 22nd Artillery Division, they changed their seal. I was in the military. We all have seals. We all have the little patch that we wear, and they changed it to be a patch of a bear with a piece of artillery in each arm, walking
Oh my
towards a
gosh.
firing cannon. By the way, a movie has been made of this I think in sometime in the 2010s. I haven't seen it, but
I'm concerned about the quality of said movie, David.
Yeah, I don't want to see it.
With you.
I think if you're watching this, you should probably just take this in as your story.
Yeah.
Because I'm concerned about how they effed with it. But after that, Voytek, the 22nd Artillery Division, was stationed in Scotland after the war ended, and they took Voytek with them, and he became a local celebrity because you got a brown bear hanging out with dudes, smoking cigarettes, drinking beer, and wrestling. And so all the Scots came around and hung out with the bear, and he was then moved to the Edinburgh Zoo, where he stayed in Edinburgh. And he was a celebrity at the Edinburgh. God, this dude had a gifted life, man. From a bag of a shepherd, right, to being a local celebrity in Scotland. I can imagine that the weather was a lot better for his furry ass up in Scotland than it was in the deserts of Iran. To the day he died at the age of 21, which is pretty good for a bear. To the day he died, ex-Polish soldiers who served with Voytek would come and visit him. And they all say the same thing. Every time he would see them, he would give them the signal for, "Give me a cigarette. Give me a drink." He wanted his alcohol, and he wanted his smokes.
That's so funny.
By the way, he was retired from the military, and he received a raise. He retired as a corporal.
Wow.
So that is the story of Voytek, the fighting bear.
An amazing story, way more uplifting than mine.
It is. Actually, honestly, Mike, I teared up while I was doing my research on this about Voytek just hanging out in Scotland and all these, 70-year-old, soldiers coming to visit him and pay their
Grizzled
dues.
veterans, reliving the days. So, great story. Folks, we want your opinion. Please vote in the comments which story is more mind-blowing. Which story made you say WTF?
All right, Mike. Thanks. We'll see you next time. Hey, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe. It really means a lot, and we would love to have you coming back every week. Thank you.